We have all watched Goodfellas, and we know how it ends. Henry whines about egg noodles. Tommy gets whacked. Jimmy ends up in cuffs. Karen fades out. But what about the people Scorsese did not follow to the grave? There is the cab stand brother who took over and died free at home, the wife who outlived everyone and is still alive at 80 under an assumed name, the kids who grew up to be lawyers in the suburbs, and the 11 Lufthansa victims the film did not have room for. These are the real people from Goodfellas, and this is where every one of them actually wound up. The film covers about 30 years of New York mob life. The aftermath ran another 3 decades after that, and Scorsese had to cut it off somewhere. Some of these people died on schedule. Some outlived the entire crew. A few are still breathing right now in 2026, hiding under names you have never heard. So let's go through every real person, one at a time, and find out where the actual story ended. Let's start with the man who told the story. Henry Hill was 69 years old, one day past his birthday, lying in a Los Angeles hospital bed surrounded by monitors instead of mobsters. It was June 12th, 2012, and the cumulative damage of decades of cigarettes and cocaine had finally collapsed his heart. There was no bullet, no ice pick, no unmarked grave in Jersey. Just a nurse checking his vitals and his girlfriend, Lisa Caserta, holding his hand. The film ends with Ray Liotta complaining about egg noodles and ketchup in Suburban Exile, the famous Schnook monologue set in 1980. The real ending took another 32 years to arrive, and it looked nothing like quiet suburban regret. What happened to Henry between the movie and the hospital bed is its own collapse. He got kicked out of witness protection in 1987, not for ratting anyone out and not for getting found, but for catching a cocaine trafficking charge in Seattle. The marshals decided that protecting a man who kept committing felonies was no longer worth the paperwork, and Karen and the children got expelled alongside him by association. What followed was a long parade of failed businesses, including a Nebraska restaurant that closed within a year, a tomato sauce company called Sunday Gravy that sold a few hundred jars to true crime fans, a line of pasta, and a bar in Connecticut. He slurred his way through Howard Stern appearances and reality television cameos and signed Goodfellas posters at folding tables in convention halls for $20 a pop. He took up oil painting in the 2000s and sold canvases of mob scenes to collectors. Mostly he drank. He testified against 50 made men and associates, including Paulie Vario, Jimmy Burke, and a string of Lucchese captains, soldiers, and street guys. He put an entire crew behind bars, and he died of natural causes in bed, surrounded by people who knew exactly who he was. I think the reason no one ever came for Henry is that by the time anyone wanted him dead badly enough to actually do something about it, they were either dead themselves or serving life sentences. He was safer as a celebrity than he ever was as a rat. Karen Hill is still alive. As of 2026, she is 80 years old, living somewhere in America under an assumed name she has never publicly revealed. She was born Karen Friedman in Five Towns, Long Island in 1946. She was working as a dental hygienist when she met Henry in 1965. She married into a life she could not have imagined 2 summers earlier when she was 19. She divorced Henry officially in 2002, 12 years after the legal separation paperwork started. The marriage had been over since the witness protection expulsion in 1987, but the paperwork took another 15 years to catch up. That is how long it took her to legally extract herself from the life she had married into. She left witness protection in 1987 when Henry got expelled. The marshals offered to keep her and the children in the program. She chose to leave on her own terms. By then, she had already survived moving the family from New York to Omaha to Kentucky to Washington State, changing names every time Henry screwed up. The kids attended different schools every year. They learned not to use their real names with new friends because they would not be those people much longer. Since the early 90s, she has gone completely silent. No interviews, no memoirs, no podcast appearances. She has refused every request for 3 decades. Even her own children's 2004 memoir kept her largely off page out of respect for what she has chosen. She outlived Henry by 14 years and counting. Most people assume she is dead because that is easier than believing someone could disappear that completely in the internet age, but she did not disappear, she just shut up. And there is a real difference between the two. I would say the wife the movie portrays as the volatile center of Henry's domestic chaos turned out to be the smartest survivor of the entire crew. Jimmy Burke died exactly how he lived, in a cage, waiting. The real Jimmy Burke got arrested in 1982 and never spent a single day of freedom after that. First came a 12-year sentence for bankrolling the Boston College basketball point shaving scandal of 1978 and 1979. The scheme came from 2 Pittsburgh gamblers, the Paulie brothers, who had a friendship with Boston College center Rick Utikun. It found its way to Burke through Henry Hill, who had met one of their contacts in federal prison. Burke funded the bribes and set up the bookmaker network. 3 players agreed to shave points across 9 games. The crew made a small fortune until Henry Hill flipped and laid the whole operation out for the feds. Burke went down for the entire scheme. Henry Hill's testimony put him away on that one. Then, while he was still serving that sentence, came another conviction in 1985 for the murder of Richard Eaton, a con man who had been laundering money for Burke. Burke had tortured him in 1979 and then left him to freeze in a refrigerated meat truck in Brooklyn. The case took 6 years to make, and Henry Hill testified again. 20 years to life stacked on top of the existing 12-year sentence. Cancer killed him at Roswell Park Cancer Institute in Buffalo on April 13, 1996. He was 64. He would have been eligible for parole in 2008 if he had lived that long. He did not. He was never charged for the Lufthansa heist. He planned it, funded it, picked the crew, and picked the inside man, and the only cases the feds ever made against him were point shaving and an unrelated murder, which raises the obvious question: how did the man who built and ran the biggest cash heist of his generation walk into a federal cell without a single Lufthansa charge attached to his name? I think the body count had less to do with greed than math. Every cooperator who survived was a federal witness Burke could not unmake. He murdered the evidence so thoroughly that the feds could not build a case, even with Henry Hill's testimony. By the summer of 1979, 9 people who touched that money were dead. By 1984, the number was 11. Jimmy Burke won the Lufthansa heist. He just lost everything else. Tommy DeSimone walked into his own funeral. Joe Pesci won the 1991 Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for playing him, and delivered what became one of the shortest acceptance speeches in Oscar history. 5 words: "It's my privilege." Thank you. Pesci's portrayal of Tommy is the character who shoots Spider's foot off, who beats Billy Bats to death with a pistol, and who keeps saying funny how until you realize he's not joking. The real Tommy got a bullet, maybe several, on January 14th, 1979. That was the day his wife Angela reported him missing. He'd gone out the night before, dressed up, excited. He was finally going to be made officially inducted into the Lucchese family after years of doing their dirty work without formal membership. There was no ceremony. There was a basement or a warehouse or a car trunk, wherever the Gambinos decided to collect on a 9-year-old debt for Billy Bats and Foxy Jurothy, 2 Gambino soldiers Tommy had killed without permission from the commission. The Gambinos wanted him dead, the Luccheses wanted peace, and Burke made clear he would not start a war over one trigger-happy associate. So Tommy walked into the last room he'd ever see, thinking he was finally getting what he deserved. He was right, just not the way he expected. According to Henry Hill, Peter Ruggsy Vario and Bruno Facciolo were the men in that room with him. Paul Vario's own son was there, Lucchese Capo. The crew Tommy thought was about to make him a soldier was actually about to make him disappear. His body was never found. The leading theory puts him in the Hole, a suspected mafia graveyard on the Brooklyn-Queens border near Kennedy Airport. The film makes it look like Tommy's death followed quickly after the Billy Batts killing. In reality, he lived 9 more years with that execution order hanging over him. I believe that's theater, not mercy. 9 years of letting him think he was untouchable, then collecting on a date of their choosing. Paul Vario never saw freedom again. Vario was convicted twice based on Henry Hill's testimony, first with a 4-year fraud sentence in 1984, and then another 10 years for extortion in 1985. Both sentences were federal, and both were impossible to walk away from. He died on May 3, 1988, of respiratory failure from lung cancer at Fort Worth Federal Prison in Texas. He was 73. They buried him at St. John's Cemetery in Middle Village, Queens, the same graveyard where half of New York's mob bosses ended up, though he had to wait longer than most to get there. Here's something the film doesn't show about Paul Vario, and the film doesn't even hint at it. While Henry was in prison on an extortion charge in 1972, Vario had an affair with Karen Hill. Karen testified about it later when the case files came out. When Henry found out, he couldn't do anything about it. You don't confront the boss. You swallow it, smile when he comes by the house, let him pinch your kid's cheeks, and wait for the day you can return the favor with federal testimony. The Vario boys did not have a soft landing either. Paul Vario had 3 sons who followed him into the business. Peter, who went by Ruggsy, was widely believed to have helped kill Tommy DeSimone in 1979. He continued his father's rackets after his father went to Fort Worth, and he was indicted multiple times on labor extortion charges through the 90s and the 2000s. Then there was Leonard, the favorite, called Lenny by the family. Lenny took a fire job at Vic Construction Company in Brooklyn in July 1973. The job went wrong. 2 men dumped him at Wyckoff Heights Hospital with most of his body burned. He refused to say who he was or how it happened. He slipped into a coma and died there a few days later. The favorite son went out without giving up a name 15 years before his father reached a prison hospital bed of his own. Paul Vario Jr. took on the soldier work, and he bounced between RICO indictments his whole adult life. Of the 3 Vario sons, the favorite burned to death at 27, and the other 2 cycled through indictments for the next 30 years. Paul Sr. died in Texas with Peter and Paul Jr. still working the same rackets that put him there. Now we get to the Lufthansa body count. 11 people connected to the heist were killed within 7 months of the robbery, and the film could only show a fraction of them. Here are the rest. Stacks. Edwards died, exactly like the movie shows. Samuel L. Jackson's brief scene ends with Stacks shot during dinner. The real Parnell Edwards was killed on December 18, 1978, with food still in his mouth when he answered the door. He was supposed to destroy the getaway van. The crew had specifically told him to take it to a New Jersey junkyard and have it compacted into a cube before sunrise. Instead, he drove it to his girlfriend's apartment in Queens, did some cocaine, watched television, and passed out. The van sat on the street outside her building for almost 48 hours. The NYPD found it. The forensic team pulled prints. The whole heist was nearly unmade by a guy who could not stay awake long enough to drive 8 miles to New Jersey. Tommy and Angelo Sipe showed up at his apartment a week after the heist on December 18th. He answered the door eating dinner, and they walked in and shot him at the table. He never saw it coming, and he probably would not have understood it if he had. Martin Krugman gave Burke the Lufthansa tip, then he gave Burke a problem. Krugman was a bookmaker who ran a small operation out of a wig shop in Queens, and he had heard about the cash deliveries at the Lufthansa cargo terminal from an employee who owed him money on a parlay card. He brought the tip to Burke and was promised a finder's fee of around $500,000. After the heist, Krugman started calling around looking for his cut, kept showing up at Robert's Lounge, raised the issue in front of other crew members, and talked about it where civilians could hear. On January 6th, 1979, Burke and Angelo Sipe lured him to a meeting in Brooklyn. He was dismembered. His family spent decades wondering what happened to him, which is probably worse than knowing. Louis and Joanna Kafora died in that pink Cadillac. Louis was laundering Lufthansa money through his Brooklyn parking lot, taking dirty cash and washing it through legitimate parking receipts at a lot near Kennedy Airport. He bought his wife, Joanna, the car for her birthday, a brand new 1979 Cadillac Coupe de Ville, pink, with a white interior. He then drove it past JFK Airport, directly past the FBI surveillance teams who had eyes on him from the moment Henry Hill started naming names. Then, because he apparently wanted to die faster, he told Joanna where the money came from. Their bodies were found in March 1979 in a Brooklyn lot, still in the front seats of the pink Cadillac, the interior of which was no longer white by the time Burke's crew finished. Frenchie McMahon and Joe Manrie were the anonymous middle of Burke's cleanup. Both had been inside the cargo facility during the robbery. Both were told to lay low. Neither did. Frenchie lasted about 3 months before a new car and a Florida vacation caught attention. Manrie was the bigger talker of the two, letting details slip in rooms where Burke had ears. In mid-May 1979, both men climbed into a Buick parked in Brooklyn. Neither climbed out. The car was not found for days. These are the Lufthansa dead that Scorsese did not have screen time for, and the reason he did not is that there was nothing cinematic about them. They were ordinary men who touched extraordinary money and handled it the way ordinary men do. Burke counted on that. Richard Eaton became the freezer scene's origin. He was not actually part of the heist. He was a con artist who laundered money for Burke's other operations, mostly drug deals. Somewhere along the way, he got greedy and started skimming. Burke found out. On January 17, 1979, Eaton's body was found hog-tied and wrapped in plastic in a refrigerated meat truck parked on a Brooklyn street, frozen solid. Burke liked to make a point before he made a corpse. The film moves this killing onto Frankie Carbone's character. The real timeline puts Eaton 6 months before Carbone. The same method and the same fingerprints tying it to Burke. Scorsese compressed the events because two refrigerated truck killings would have felt repetitive. The audience only saw one. Burke did it twice. Angelo Sepp survived longer than anyone expected. In the movie, Frankie Carbone, the character primarily based on him, gets frozen with the beef. The real Sepp stayed warm for another 5 years. He had been one of the 6 gunmen on the actual Lufthansa job, and he had been Burke's primary cleaner. During the body disposal months that followed, he helped kill Krugman, he helped kill Stax Edwards. He was in the room for at least 4 of the 11 Lufthansa deaths. What got him killed in the end was not the heist. The Luccheses caught him stealing from one of their drug dealers in 1984. He had been skimming cash and cocaine for months. Lucchese's soldiers went to his basement apartment on 20th Avenue in Bath Beach on July 18, 1984. They shot him 3 times in the head while he was on the couch. Then they walked into the sleeping alcove where his 19-year-old girlfriend, Joanne Lombardo, was asleep. They shot her in the mouth. She was not part of anything. She was just there. Sepp lifted his mask during the Lufthansa robbery to wipe sweat off his face. A Lufthansa employee saw him. That witness identification could have brought the entire heist down. 5 years later, Seppi was dead for stealing from his own crew, and the Lufthansa witness statement sat in an FBI file nobody could use. Teresa Ferrara became the mystery even the FBI gave up on. She was a hairdresser in Bayside, Queens, and she was dating Tommy DeSimone. She knew about Lufthansa secondhand because Tommy talked. She disappeared in February 1979. Her torso washed up in Barnegat Inlet near Toms River, New Jersey in May. The arms, legs, and head were never recovered. The FBI eventually identified her through a recent breast augmentation surgery. Her girlfriends were among the people who knew names. Paolo Licastri came in from Sicily specifically for the Lufthansa job. He was a Zip, the slang for an imported Sicilian soldier, flown in to handle specific jobs, and then sent home. He was supposed to be on a plane back to Palermo within 72 hours of the heist. He stayed instead, started spending the money, and talked. On June 13, 1979, his body was found on a burning trash heap in Flatlands, Brooklyn. The Sicilian who came in for one quick job ended up as another body Burke had to bury before he could leave the country. Now, for the ones who weren't part of Lufthansa, but still made the movie. Billy Batts asked the wrong question. William Billy Batts Bentvina was a Gambino soldier who had just served 6 years in the federal system, and the welcome home party was supposed to celebrate his return. Instead, it became the last party he would attend. It started with a shoe shine comment. "Hey Tommy, you still shine in shoes." A joking reference to DeSimone's teenage years that turned out to be a fatal mistake. DeSimone, Burke, and Henry Hill beat Bentvina unconscious. They put him in the trunk of a car, and they drove the body upstate to a kennel a friend named Clyde Brooks ran. Along the way, they heard sounds from the trunk, banging. The kind of banging that means the body in the trunk is not a body yet. DeSimone and Burke pulled over on a country road, opened the trunk, and finished the job with a shovel and a tire iron. They buried him on the kennel property. 3 months later, the kennel owner called Burke. The land had been sold to developers who were going to start digging foundations. Burke ordered Henry and Tommy to drive back upstate and dig up the body before the construction crews arrived. They did. The corpse was moved to a junkyard owned by another Burke associate in New Jersey. The remains were crushed in a mechanical compactor along with 24 cars. Billy Batts became scrap metal. The murder took 9 years to collect on. The Gambinos remembered. They always do. Robert's Lounge has its own story. The bar Burke owned in Queens was the operational center for the entire crew. Crew meetings happened in the back room. Cash got counted upstairs. By 1980, Robert's Lounge had been raided so many times the regulars stopped going. Burke kept it open as a meeting place. Then he got arrested in 1982, and the bar closed for good. The operational hub for the biggest cash robbery in American history became a vacant storefront. The same year, its owner stopped seeing daylight. In 1990, after Goodfellas came out, the FBI got a tip from an informant that bodies were buried in the basement under the bar. 6 skeletons, according to the tip. The Bureau dug up the entire basement floor with permission from the new owner and found 2, both unidentifiable and both believed to be Burke associates from the late 70s. Neither has ever been definitively named. The building was demolished in the 2000s to make way for a strip mall parking lot. The strip mall is still there. The men in the basement are still nameless. Spider got exactly what the movie shows. Michael Janko was a teenage bartender at a card game run by Henry's crew. One night in 1970, DeSimone shot him in the foot over a forgotten drink. A week later, Spider showed up to work, still bandaged and still limping, and the crew gave him a hard time about it. DeSimone kept goading him until Spider finally told Tommy to go fuck himself. 3 bullets hit him in the chest, and Spider was dead on the floor before the card game even stopped. Burke was furious, not because Spider did not deserve it in some twisted mob sense, but because the killing was pointless. Burke made Tommy bury the body alone. Spider was barely 20 years old. Now for the family who lived through it, Henry's son, Greg, became exactly what his father was not. He grew up changing names every time Henry screwed up, cycling through Omaha, Kentucky, and Washington State. By the time he was a teenager, he had lived more identities than most spies. He graduated from college, went to law school, passed the bar, and became a practicing attorney. He still uses his assumed name. Only his wife knows who his father really was. When he sat down for a 60 Minutes interview about the family memoir, he wore prosthetic makeup and used a fake name on the chyron. The producer agreed to film it that way, or not at all. Gina Hill went her own direction. She moved back to New York after her parents separated, attended NYU, got married, and started a family. Like Greg, she lives under an assumed name. In 2004, the two of them published On the Run: A Mafia Childhood. It was 200 pages about what it was like to grow up in witness protection when your father kept getting kicked out of it. They made clear they were not doing it again. No follow-up memoirs, no documentary deals, no social media presence. The book existed because they wanted to set the record on what their childhood actually cost them. And after that, silence. Both kids married people who knew the truth before the wedding. Neither has children who use the Hill name. The line, as a public surname, ends with Henry. Louis Werner was the only conviction. The biggest cash robbery in American history at the time was $5,875,000 in cash and jewelry, and exactly one person went to federal prison for it. Werner was the Lufthansa cargo agent who provided Burke with the layout, the timing, the employee schedules, and the location of the safe. Without him, there is no heist. He was convicted in May 1979. He received 15 years in prison and a $25,000 fine. He started cooperating with prosecutors almost immediately, rolled over on anyone he could name, and his sentence got reduced to 5 years. He served 4 years. He married his girlfriend after his release. They both disappeared into witness protection in 1983. He was the most cooperative witness the case ever produced. As far as anyone can determine, Louis Werner is still alive. He is the only Lufthansa participant who is neither dead nor serving a life sentence. The inside man got the easiest ride. The crew that protected him got the body bags. There is a lesson in there somewhere if you can stomach it. Frank Burke didn't get the screen time his father did, but he got the same ending in half the time. Jimmy Burke's son was a small-time street guy in his own right. He had grown up watching his father run the Lufthansa crew. He thought he would inherit the operation. What he inherited was a target. On May 18, 1987, Frank Burke was shot to death outside the Suncrest Tavern in East New York, Brooklyn, after selling cocaine cut with flour to another dealer. He was 26. A drug dealer named Tito Ortiz was charged with second-degree murder. Jimmy was already in federal prison serving his stacked sentences. He found out about his son's death from a prison chaplain. The federal system denied the prison furlough request. Burke watched the funeral on a television in a community room. That's the inheritance the Lufthansa heist actually generated for the next generation of Burkes. Edward McDonald is the most unusual figure in the entire cast list because he was a real federal prosecutor before he became a Goodfellas actor, and he is still both. McDonald appears in the film as himself, the strike force prosecutor briefing Henry and Karen about witness protection in the second-to-last scene. The character is real. McDonald actually was the lead prosecutor on Henry Hill's cooperation deal. Scorsese cast him to play the role because no actor could deliver the exact bureaucratic tone McDonald used in real life when explaining to a wife that her old life was over. McDonald did one take, and he used his actual prosecutor speech almost verbatim. That is how authentic the scene had to be. The man who actually broke that news to Karen Hill in real life had to break it again on camera. After Goodfellas, McDonald could have cashed out on the recognition. He did not. He left the U.S. Attorney's Office in 1989 and went into private practice. He is currently a partner at Deschert LLP in New York City, focused on white-collar criminal defense. He is in his late 70s as of 2026 and still actively practicing. The federal prosecutor who put Henry Hill into witness protection now defends the kinds of people he used to prosecute. I would argue that is the most quietly American second act in the entire cast list. Paulie Vario 1. Frank DeLeo plays a character based on Vito, known as Paulie Vario, Paul's older brother, who ran the cab stand across from young Henry's house. That was the cab stand where Henry started running errands at 11 years old, and where his whole life trajectory was set as a kid, skipping school to bring coffee to the soldiers, playing cards in the back room. After Paul Vario's arrest in 1980, Paulie took over the crew's day-to-day operations as acting boss. Unlike Paul, he was careful. He didn't get on the federal radar. He didn't let people skim where the wires could hear it. Paulie Vario died on March 9th, 1988, of natural causes in his own home, having never spent a night in federal custody. Paul Sr. died 8 weeks later in Fort Worth Federal Prison. The wise guy who stayed quiet went out the way every wise guy wants to, and almost none of them do. The brother who ran the operation died in a cage. Scorsese made a film about how good it felt to be a wise guy right up until it didn't. He didn't make a film about how it ended. The famous ones died in federal hospital beds. The clever ones cooperated and got moved to suburbs. Nobody remembers. The ones who actually got away with it were the ones the camera never wanted. That's not the lesson Goodfellas teaches. It's the one the real story does. Subscribe, and I'll see you next week.